Hey guys, it's Morgan from Goldshaw Farm, and I wanted to make a video to just give you 6 quick tips that you should be thinking about if you are trying to brood goslings or ducklings, especially if you're doing it your first time, but even if you've done it before, there might be a couple of things that you find useful in this video, so I hope this helps. You are so stinking adorable, little gosling. Yeah? Hey, how's it going? So tip number 1 is you need to be thinking about the safety of your goslings and ducklings above all else. These little ones are adorable and cute and funny. They're completely defenseless. They're relying on you to protect them, keep them warm, keep them safe, keep them fed. And so as you're thinking about getting little birds like this, know that that's a tremendous amount of responsibility and it takes a lot of work. You have to make sure you have a brooder set up, which is keeping them warm for the first few weeks of their lives until they get the chance to feather out. Like if you look at this one right now, it's just got its little soft baby fuzz going. It doesn't have real feathers. Ducks and geese can live in very, very cold temperatures, but when they're little like this, they need to be kept warm. Usually it's the mother sitting on the baby birds that keeps them warm when they're actually young. But if you're doing this in an artificial setup, you're gonna need heat lamps of some sort or some sort of heating plate, something to keep them warm.
You're also going to need some sort of protective area to keep them safe. It can be an enclosed area that you can keep out predators. You know, we have this room here, and I've actually got them in this broken 100-gallon tank. It's pretty much the perfect space for housing a few of them. There's probably a few too many right now, but I'm going to be actually selling a couple of these guys very shortly, and so we'll free up some space for the others. There's all sorts of brooding setups that you can use.
I actually recently built a shed for being able to brood my ducklings and goslings outside. But because we're still at the edge of winter, I mean, heck, it just snowed here in northern Vermont this morning. I'm raising this batch of birds here inside. But really, what it comes down to is you need to be able to keep them at a safe temperature. It starts at about 90 degrees right when they're first born, and then it progressively lowers. You also don't want them to be too hot either, because they'll feather out much slower, which really impedes the development of the birds. The second point I would make is that water management is everything. Some of the biggest messes and the biggest smellinesses and the biggest health hazards for your birds are going to come from water. You want to keep their bedding dry, but they also need to have access to water where they can dunk their bill into water and get a good healthy drink. That's a big part of how waterfowl like ducks and geese actually eat their food. They actually keep it in their bill and they swish it around, and they need that water submersion to be able to do that. You know, some people try to brood little ducklings or goslings with like little nipple waterers like you'd use for a chick, and that actually won't work. They need to be able to dunk their head. The problem is though, they are waterfowl, and so their inclination is to try to go full on swimming and go crazy, and that's not good either. And so what I've found that's worked best is when they're tiny and they're in their first couple of weeks, I actually use poultry feeding trays, and I'll fill those up with water. That way they can dunk their heads in and get the drink they need, but they can't go any further than their head. The downside here is though that you have a limited amount of water that you can hold, and so you need to have several of these to be able to supply the right amount of water for your birds. I will also say I'm not a big fan of waterers like this. The reason is the ducklings and goslings will splash and make a mess in here, and all the water will drain out, and then all that water is going to spread on your bedding and just make a total mess. It's going to stink. It can potentially get your birds wetter than they should be. I have used these in the past, but right now at this point I'm opposed to using these. When it comes to water, the other tip I'd offer you guys up is that I will sometimes make like a platform or a screen and sit it over like a piece of Tupperware or plastic to catch the water. And so when you have it over that screen, I'll usually like use 2x4s and hardware cloth. The water drains through and doesn't get the bedding or the birds nearly as wet when they splash around with it. So I strongly advise you use something like that. The next tip I'd offer up is make sure you give your baby ducks and geese some sand or some sort of grit. I usually actually just use regular old sand. It's cheap and easy to supply. What it does is the birds will swallow it and use it as part of their digestion, so it helps them actually break down their food better. It helps them digest better. Particularly for geese, it's really important. Geese are eating and shredding all that grass. They need something to help them break it down, and the sand does a nice job. So what I'll usually do is I will just take a dish like this and set it down inside, right near their food and water. That way they have access to that as well, and they can dig in and explore it if they're interested. Hey, little one, you wanna try it? Yeah? Aww. Now for my next tip, it's all about the outdoors. Particularly for goslings, but for ducks too. The earlier you can expose them to the outdoors, the better. In fact, when I built that new brooder shed, I've actually constructed an outdoor area that I can let the birds go out during certain times of the day, so I can keep them outside during the day as they get a little bit older, but bring them back inside at night because our temps drop below the 40s on a regular basis. But even before I'm bringing my birds outside, I will often start to feed them grass as early as like 2 or 3 days old. The reason for this is the grass is really their natural food and natural part of the diet for the gosling, and they get to break it down and shred it. It gives them something to do, and so that they're not so bored and that they don't pick at each other nearly as much. There's also some vitamins like niacin that are contained in some of these plants, particularly if you can get things like dandelion greens. And so really often as I'm raising these baby birds, I will feed them like a handful of grass just like this. Everybody's sleeping, so this might not work. Hey guys, look what I got. Something to play with. Something new, something fun. What you're gonna find is the older that they get, the more vigorous they're gonna eat it. And as they get a little bit older and they get used to you giving it to them, they go crazy for it. The next tip I'd offer up is that you should just spend time with them. Get them comfortable with you. The more time you can spend with your baby birds, the more they're gonna be spending time with you as they get older.
And the cat's in the cradle and a silver spoon.
If you just leave your birds by themselves and have them always stay with their flock, they're just gonna always be comfortable with their flock, and they're not gonna be as comfortable with you. They might even be afraid of you. I made that mistake with my earliest batch of ducklings that I ever had. And even as adults today, they still are terrified of me. And now some of this is a little bit dictated by the breed and variety that you have. Like, so an Emden or Pilgrim goose is very affectionate and very human friendly. Indian runner or khaki Campbell ducks are much more skittish. Pekin ducks are actually pretty friendly. It really depends on the variety that you have in terms of how they're gonna be with you, but then also how you raise them. So it is a combination of that nature and nurture. But if you spend time with them now, they will spend time with you later. Now for my final tip, I'm gonna have to take you guys outside. So the last tip that I would offer up for you guys is to make sure that you have a plan for your baby birds long after they stop being baby birds. Where are you gonna house them? How are you gonna feed them? Why are you keeping them? Having a sense for all these things are really, really important. You know, are you gonna have your birds live on pasture and you're gonna move them in a mobile chicken tractor or a mobile chicken coop of some sort? Are you gonna build them a coop that's stationary and predator proof? Are you gonna offer them predator protection like my buddy Toby over there? You know, thinking about those things now while they're still small is important because you might need to do preparation. You might need to build that chicken tractor or build that coop. Make sure you have that plan. You know, so for example, for me, the goslings that I have inside there that I just recently hatched out, I've actually sold several of them, and so I don't actually plan to raise all of them inside that room for all that long. I actually have 7 of them who are going off farm later today. If you guys are interested in finding out what we do here on our farm, be sure to check out this next video and also hit that subscribe button. Here at Goldshaw Farm, we're raising geese and ducks, trying to build a sustainable farm here up in northern Vermont. And usually we like to tell some good stories along the way, so I hope you guys follow along. Thanks.